Good evening, Brian. Good evening, opinionated idiots here. Hope everybody's having a great night and it's about to get better, I believe.
I hope so. Yeah, I think we've been kind of sleuthing this out here. This whole, this whole update with Bethany Funk.
I just want to say one thing before we get into Bethany.
Sure.
Um, the body that was found in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, it was a walking distance of 15 minutes from
Mm,
the missing
I'm
person,
sorry.
Dana Smithers. It's actually 0.3 miles
Sure.
between where the body was found and her home where she was last, well, her phone was last seen,
Mm,
and her next door neighbor. So it's a quarter mile. And it's just off of Interstate 80, which would have been the main way to go from, say, Albrightsville, Pennsylvania to Stroudsburg, but that is just,
mm.
a coincidence.
Just a
But
coincidence.
the body was very close, and this is my local news. It's breaking. It just came out this afternoon.
Yeah,
But
and
we
you
pray for
kind
her
of
family. We pray
yeah,
for her family, that no matter what happens, they get answers in peace.
absolutely. It's something that, I think going back to when Bryan Kohberger was arrested, obviously knowing, where he was from that area in Pennsylvania, just being Pennsylvania itself, the questions were, has he done this before? Is PA investigating, some cold cases to see if there's any types of connections? And I know that Dana Smithers' name has been brought up a lot around kind of in this circle of Idaho. And, I don't want people to not, I don't want people to just ignore this. If it's not any type of, relation in this, I think it's still, informative to get her information out there because maybe someone knows something or heard something. If even if Kohberger's not tied to, this or any of this is tied to this, I still think that to raise awareness in this case and get it out there, I don't want to pass, just lightly pass on this. So we'll continue some updates here in
Absolutely.
her case as well because she deserves justice as well, and it's a strange incident. I think what was the last thing that was seen of her was on a ring cam, and she literally vanished into existence. So it's sad, and her family needs answers too.
And I pray for her children and her family. It's horrible, and hopefully she is found safe, and if not, I hope they get their answers.
Absolutely. All right, so let me bring up this graphic. We're going to talk about, recently there has been a lot of speculation as to what's going on with Bethany Funk. There was talks about quashing the subpoena. There's talks about her now meeting with lawyers, and there's also talks of canceling this preliminary hearing and going to a grand jury. Now, I've been reading and seeing some information about possibly and most likely, because the grand jury, from what I understand, is going to be meeting here in a couple of weeks, that they just skip this preliminary hearing, get this interview out of the way right away, and they go right into just a grand jury. So let's pull up this graphic that Laura worked some time on. It's really great, and I want to show this with everybody, and then you can kind of talk us through this. Let me just enlarge this here and take us through your presentation. This is really great.
So with the past few days, subpoena came out for Bethany Funk to appear at the preliminary hearing on the third day on June 28th. It turns out her attorneys have said, "Okay, we're going to come to an agreement that we will meet with the defense." Okay. All right. Um so Bethany's going to have to make the 12-hour drive or catch a flight
Right.
to meet with the defense, unless it's done, of course, virtually. But
Hmm.
she is a distance from Moscow.
Hmm.
So why why would why would they go to a grand jury? What's the purpose? I mean, the majority of people that aren't well versed in the legal system are just probably thinking, "Oh, whatever." So I looked into this, and there's some good reasons that you would go to a grand jury
Hmm.
than sticking with the preliminary hearing. And a grand jury is convened in private. which means it's on a docket, but the docket's private and we won't know it happened until after it has happened.
Mhm.
However, they have regular schedulings of grand juries, and they just, it's, okay, we'll have a grand jury this day. Which cases are we going to look at, or which cases go which day?
Right.
The first, obvious reason for the prosecution to move to the grand jury would be because this case has such high public interest.
Mhm.
I mean, really, it was on the national news, but social media, specifically TikTok, they
YouTube.
YouTube, like, everybody started getting on this. I mean, everybody was enamored with how can 4 young, lively college students just be killed in the middle of the night in their home. It's sad. I mean, we all can relate to this in some way, shape, or form. So it really has generated high public interest. So that's one of the reasons that a court system would, or a prosecutor would decide, you know what, we want to get this out of the public. We want to just do it in private and get our answer. Second one would be to test a witness before a jury, meaning putting the witness on the stand essentially and getting their testimony before a jury, before they would go to trial. Uh, how will the surviving roommates, how will the Gonsalves family, who I believe has been considered potential witnesses in the case, how will
Mhm.
they fare on the stand? What could happen when they are up there? Um, will they falter? What does their testimony look like? It kind of gives them like a dry run on how it would go. The third big reason would be to avoid the cross-examination by the defense. And then I started thinking, could the reason Bethany Funk agreed to sit with the defense is to avoid the examination during the preliminary hearing? This would be it would be on record, of course, but it wouldn't be in the formal courtroom like a preliminary hearing would. It would be an interview more likely. So
Mhm.
that could avoid, I mean, imagine the trauma and stress. Her life is has been devastated. Having to meet with them is a lot less pressure than having to be on the stand at a preliminary hearing and being cross-examined by the defense. So that's
Right.
another really good reason why. I mean, it kinda works hand in hand. She gets to meet with them. Maybe she agreed to meet with them because there is a grand jury, convening, and she scheduled them both in the same trip back to Moscow. Maybe her attorneys I mean, if there is a grand jury, I'm assuming her attorneys would be privy to that information probably by now,
Mhm.
and she could very well, say to her, her attorneys could say, "Why don't we just meet with the defense?" The defense wouldn't know about the grand jury. They wouldn't know until after the fact. They would probably know maybe moments before we would know in public because that would be breaking news. But yeah, so that's another reason why. And the last reason, now this one I really had to look at. This is quite
Mhm.
the vocabulary term here. Would be that it involves malfeasance in office. So I took a look at what does malfeasance mean.
Mhm.
Malfeasance is offensive misconduct in office. Misfeasance, which is similar and goes hand in hand with it, is committing a lawful act in a wrongful manner. So I got thinking, all this talk of Brady Giglio, I am not the in-house Brady Giglio expert.
Right.
Um, but could this have to do with an officer that is on the Brady Giglio list for Idaho, but Idaho does not publicize the Brady Giglio list for their state?
Mhm.
So they're one of the ones that does not participate in it. Could it have to do with one of the first officers on the scene? Um, and
Nunez.
he is on the Brady Giglio list because of some questionable things that happened during something called Stickergate.
Nunez.
Nunez, yeah.
Yeah.
So um, that also makes sense. That way they can get him, question him. It's he also is a witness to see how is he going to fare on the stand. Well, what's going to happen with him? It allows the prosecution to kind of test him out, give him a test drive and see. So, I mean, really, could a grand jury already be on the docket for May for this case?
Yeah, I mean, this makes some really good points. The thing that I go back to, and I just want to go back up to here to the high public interest, and I want to talk a little bit about, um, just the mainstream media in general. I was seeing a lot of things that they were putting out there, and they were talking about, Bethany Funk, and they would cut just from that document that says she has expulsionary evidence for Bryan Kohberger. Now that's in his favor, but what they failed to put in there is the sentence before that. And from what I understand, and I'm not a legal expert, and I can't remember quite the quote, but it says there is evidence basically for and against. But the media now is putting this narrative out like, and I know what they're doing. It's for clicks and views and for people to, oh, he's gonna walk, but you're failing to put in the true language of the document. That's what I understand when I interpret it. And like I said, I'm not a lawyer.
It yeah, the quote actually, when you break the sentence down, it's Bethany Funk has information material to the charges against BK,
So
Bryan
she's got
Kohberger.
she's got evidence against for
Against
basically for the charges, right?
that's for the prosecution. So
Right,
that is to build the case.
right,
And it also states that this information is unique to her experiences and cannot be provided by another witness.
right.
So she obviously has something against him that nobody else has.
Mhm.
But then the other part was portions of information she has is exculpatory to Bryan Kohberger. And once
Right,
again, this information is unique to her experiences and all. So portions of the information is exculpatory. Now, exculpatory doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't do it. It means that it could absolve him of some responsibility. Whether he was working with someone else, whether it wasn't premeditated, which I find that hard to believe, but um it's not to say that he is not guilty. It's just saying that it's in his favor, whether or not um I mean it would all go down to a jury eventually in the trial if which I believe it will go to trial. I mean, right there, I mean, they could say, "Oh, but you also said this." So
right.
the defense is gleaming something that says we have something that will work in Bryan Kohberger's favor, but there's also stuff that works against him.
But I want to make sure this is very, very clear here. All this that we're doing is speculation. Bryan Kohberger is only the suspect in this investigation right now. We know that he's been arrested, but he's also offered due process in our judicial system. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we have not convicted him, but he is the person of interest and the person being charged in this case.
He
Uh,
is innocent as of right now.
until proven guilty. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So let me do this. I found an actually very interesting video that kind of follows up with what we're talking about here. I'm going to pull that up really quick, and it was from I think Brian Enton was standing in for Banfield, and he actually talked with a lawyer that's in the Idaho area, and they actually talk about this as well. And then I want to talk a little bit, if we can, if you have time, to maybe talk a little bit about what we think is going on. I think that if you look at the case, and we've talked about this, you look at all the evidence that they have against Bryan Kohberger. I said this like, I try to take it as a whole pie. Okay, so you have a whole pie in front of you, and there's going to be portions of that pie that's for the prosecution, and there's going to be portions of that pie for the defense. If you basically break it down percentage, I look at it and say there's 95% of evidence right now collected to prosecute Bryan Kohberger, and there's only about 5% right now, if I'm understanding this correctly, that they've put out, which is what Exhibit A and B
Yes.
in his defense. And it took them, like you said, we were talking, it took them a very, very long time to get this evidence out there. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden it's Bethany Funk. I think it was a scare tactic,
Uh,
or maybe she does know something, but I think it's just a scare tactic and to create a better public image for Bryan Kohberger at this point. What
it absolutely could
do you
be.
think? Yeah.
Absolutely. It could be. And the one thing that we're forgetting is the only reason we know that Bethany Funk has been that the defense is anticipating calling her or saying that she has any type of exculpatory evidence that would work to his favor is because she lives in Nevada. The only reason we're privy to her documents is because they had to go out of the state of Idaho. I mean, in my opinion, I believe there is another subpoena from the defense to Dylan
Mhm.
because she obviously is a witness. But we don't know that's those missing pieces of the puzzle of the pie. I mean, we don't know, but I think it would be I think, in my opinion, it would be safe to assume Dylan is probably also being subpoenaed by the defense.
Yeah, this is a good point. Giovanni says, "I believe Bethany has a nothing burger," and that's where I think it goes
Very
along with that
possible.
scare tactic. This is scare tactic by the defense to shake things up, to create a better public image of Bryan Kohberger right now in their defense. We know there's been a lot of media, a lot of public scrutiny against him. That I said that right away. I said, I think this might just be a bullshit thing. You know.
It very well could be.
Okay, let's pull up this video from uh and let's listen to this here. Hang on one second. Okay.
Really, that's the beginning. That's where they
Rewind
find
this really quick. Sorry.
the preliminary hearing. Really, that's the beginning. That's where they find probable cause. And then after that is where he would actually plead not guilty or guilty. And then you would have the setting of the trial. So we're still at this very early stages, and it doesn't really.
I want to just answer this really quick. It says, can the defense lie about having exculpatory evidence with Bethany Funk? Well, that would be lying, wouldn't it? Like they
Yeah.
couldn't just make something up. Yeah. Yeah, that would be
But
an
if they believe they have it, then
sure.
it wouldn't be a lie.
Yeah, if they that legal language, if they believe, right?
I mean, if they believe there was something in one of her interviews that led them to believe that that would work in his favor, then they can claim that right now as exculpatory evidence.
Right. All right, let's keep playing through this here.
Signify anything to me other than that they are looking at this is a good time to bring in some additional resources.
And I know I'm stopping this again. So there's been two deputy attorneys assigned to this case as well. When I look at that, and again, I am not a legal expert, I am just kind of giving my opinion. I feel that they feel the case is very, very strong. And maybe they're adding in these deputy attorneys to kind of lift some of the casework. They're probably overloaded right now. But if they're adding in other attorneys to assist in this, I got to think their case is pretty strong. How do you feel about that, Laura?
Absolutely. I mean, if they're getting 2 attorneys from the attorney general's office, I mean, they're some of the top state attorneys.
Mhm.
It's not that they're asking for help, it's that they're asking for assistance. There's a lot of evidence that has been processed. There's a lot of things to go through. With larger cases such as this and with all of the electronic sources and look at all the different things they sent out search warrants for. There's a lot to comb through. I would expect that they would need more than one prosecutor to become a master of this. I mean, I think we can all say that, there's certain parts of the case that I know more about. There's certain parts of the case that other people in our Discord chat
Sure.
know about.
Yeah.
And it's great having a whole panel of people like, "Oh, well, you're working on the GPS coordinates. You're
Yeah.
working on Brady Giglio. You're
Right.
working on this." That's what the attorneys need. They need more eyes on this because in a prosecutor wants it to be a slam dunk. They're not going in there to just wing it. They wanna make sure they do this right because once again, they are in the public eye. They were just, some Moscow, Idaho, that Latah County prosecutors, and they're not used to a huge case like this. So they wanna make sure they do it right by getting 2 of their best.
Yeah, I don't I, like I said, I mean, to bring in, two more high-powered attorneys, I feel like they got something big. I think people are I think people are gonna be like, "Holy smokes," like, just the amount of evidence, and I think that defense at this point right now, just seeing kind of the motions and what they're doing, I think the defense is backed up against the wall right now. It's just my opinion. It's my opinion. And yeah, it says here, MJC says, "Yep, nothing burger," and he's using it to harass her or using her not to hear or see anything. Counter that DM said, and that might be. I think that's a good point, and I think that might be possible. All right, let's keep playing through this video here.
The preliminary hearing is in June. It seems like they would really have to get these new attorneys up to speed, which, I mean, there's a lot of evidence we know in this case.
Absolutely. They're going to have to come up to speed, and they're probably all going to be working on different aspects of the case in certain ways. As we know, there's a lot of scientific evidence in this case. There's DNA. We know that there were some scientific evidence that was returned from the search warrants. We don't know what the results were, but we can presume that there's going to need to be some laying of the foundation, so to speak, where they bring in experts to testify, to get in that scientific evidence. We know there have been thousands of pages of disclosures, although we don't know what they are. We can at least see that much. So there is going to be a whole lot of evidence, and it's going to be a coordinated effort from all of these attorneys involved, for sure.
Let me ask you this, because I get this question a lot, Jessica, and even one of my prosecutor friends from another state asked me today, why hasn't there been a grand jury? Why not have the grand jury come in? Because it's my understanding, at least in other states, that you then would not have to have the preliminary hearing. Why have we not seen a grand jury in this case?
We may, and I expect that we likely will. I would not be surprised at all if sometime in May they convene that grand jury. The grand juries, at least in Ada County, they convene regularly and every week, every 2 weeks or so. And so I don't know what the time schedule is like up there. It's a smaller county in Latah County, but they're going to convene a grand jury when they can, and then we won't know about it. It will be a surprise if they find probable cause through the grand jury process. So it's very likely, you're right, that sometime in May, they may have a grand jury set to convene, and they may find probable cause. And then that preliminary hearing will just disappear. It'll be vacated and no longer necessary.
Interesting. And just real quick, since we have you here and you understand Idaho law so well, I want to ask you about the development from yesterday about Bethany Funk. They're trying to get her to have to come and testify at the grand jury. She's in Nevada. Can they actually force her with her being out of state?
I do believe they actually can force her to come testify based upon the Idaho law. It's the Idaho law that applies. I know that her attorney cited a lot of the Nevada law, which apparently is a little different than what we have here in Idaho. But I do believe that they can compel her to come testify pursuant to Idaho law at that preliminary hearing, as they have done. I don't think it's going to change the outcome. I know they've stated that they believe that there's something exculpatory there potentially. That's could be very minor. I actually agree with her attorney in the sense that she said this is not a mini trial, and there's no weighing of the evidence, regardless of what she has to say. It's going to be a matter of what is the prosecutor presenting, what is their because all they have to do is show substantial evidence on the elements of the crime, and if they do that, then they've established probable cause, regardless of anything that the defendants produces.
And it's so interesting what you say. I haven't thought a lot about it. I mean, if they have this grand jury behind closed doors in secret sometime next month, we may not even, this might be a moot point. We might not even have a preliminary hearing. Jessica Bublitz, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank
What do you think, Laura?
Well, Brian Enton said if they have the grand jury, we might not have the preliminary hearing. If they have the grand jury and they do find that they have probable cause to indict him, we will not have the preliminary hearing. So if they do have one, I mean, at this point, May is Monday.
Yeah.
So we're 7 weeks out from the preliminary hearing. If they're going to do it, it's going to be soon. The only unfortunate thing, and I think everybody would agree, is that if this happens, we won't have any more answers because it will all be done in secret. We won't hear much about what would be presented at the preliminary hearing. So just like Alien Dog said, you better hope there's more evidence, because what they got now, he's skipping to freedom. We don't know what they have now, but I believe we can safely assume they have a lot. And we just don't know because everything is sealed. We
Yeah,
can
I mean,
only infer from what the documents are and just connecting all the puzzle pieces together. What do you think, Brian?
yeah, I think no, I always go back to this. What was it? First reported, it was either 103, 105 pieces of evidence taken from the King Road house, over 4,000 photos and digital scans of the King Road house. You know, this is the thing I think people miss in all of this. You have digital, you have digital forensics they're going to go through. They have cell phone records they're going to go through. They have cell phone locations they're going to go through. They're looking at bank account information. I've been kind of going over the search warrants for Amazon, Walmart, and eBay where those knives were purchased or potentially purchased. So you have that. You have all of the evidence that was collected at his BK's apartment. You have all the evidence that was collected at his parents' apartment. And I will say this: what was the first item that was collected at his
Um,
parents' house? What was it
Knife.
listed as? Yeah,
Knife.
knife.
Just knife.
We don't know what it is, but it could be. It could be the knife. I mean, here's a logical explanation of this too. Let's say you have a crime in one state and you're that person that committed that crime, and you're getting ready, in a couple of weeks to go somewhere all the way across the country. Wouldn't you probably take some of that stuff and try to get rid of it somewhere else? I mean, just a thought.
100%.
Just the thought. So I think there's a lot. I think there's a ton of evidence. I was reading through, just refreshing on some of the search warrants today too. The UPS search warrant, they're looking for video of any truck that was in and around the Moscow, Idaho area that had a front-facing camera during a certain, a certain timeline, 11/6 through 11/14. So that leads me to believe they may have that white Hyundai Elantra on camera. They may have that white Hyundai Elantra between that week driving around in and around King Road. You don't know. There's a lot of things that are there. And I always say this: the evidence is there. You just have to sort through it and connect the dots. And that's something we've kind of been working on.